The old farmhouse smelled of dust and memories. For Sarah, it was a scent she associated with summers spent chasing fireflies and the gentle, weathered smile of her grandmother. Now, standing in the living room with its floral print sofa and doily-covered end tables, the smell was a heavy blanket of finality. Her grandmother was gone, and the task of clearing out the house before the estate sale fell to Sarah, the only grandchild who lived close enough to manage it. Her life in the city, a whirlwind of marketing meetings, online grocery deliveries, and curated social media posts, felt a universe away from this quiet, stagnant air. She sighed, running a finger through the dust on the television set. It was going to be a long weekend. The logical place to start, she decided, was the attic. Get the worst of it over with. The pull downstairs groaned in protest as she yanked the cord, a shower of dust motes dancing in the slanted sunlight from the hall window. The air that wafted down was even older, tinged with the scent of mothballs and dry rot. The attic was a time capsule. There were trunks filled with clothes from decades past, a stack of National Geographic magazines that probably contained articles about the Soviet Union, and boxes labeled in her grandmother's elegant cursive, Christmas decorations, baby clothes, photo albums. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, a work email. She ignored it, feeling a pang of guilt. This was more important. In the far corner, tucked under the eaves, was a small, lacquered wooden chest she didn't recognize. It wasn't like her grandmother's other practical, cardboard storage. This one was ornate, with brass fittings that were green with age. Intrigued, she dragged it into a patch of light and tried the latch. It was locked. A thorough search of the nearby area yielded no key. Frustration bubbled up. It was probably just full of more old photos or keepsakes, but the mystery of it was compelling. She carried the chest downstairs, its weight surprising her. Setting it on the kitchen table, she contemplated forcing the lock, but it felt disrespectful. Her grandmother had been a private woman, orderly and intentional. If she had locked this chest, she had a reason. It was then that Sarah noticed a slight unevenness in the felt lining of one of the kitchen drawers while searching for a screwdriver. She pressed on it, and a small, hidden compartment popped open. Inside, nestled alone, was a tarnished silver key. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This felt like something out of a movie. The key fit perfectly. The lock turned with a satisfying click. Taking a deep breath, Sarah lifted the lid. There was no pile of gold coins or priceless jewels. Instead, the chest was neatly organized. On top lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Beneath them was a leather-bound journal, and under that, a smaller, velvet-lined box. She picked up the journal first. The cover was soft with age, and embossed on the front in flaking gold leaf were the initials, E.W. Eleanor Williams, her grandmother. Sarah untied the ribbon and opened to the first page. The date at the top was May 3, 1965. The handwriting was her grandmother's, but younger, looser, filled with the energy she rarely showed in her later years. Met a boy today, the entry began. Not a boy, really. A man. His name is James. James Carter. He's here for the summer, helping old Mr. Henderson with his farm. I was walking by the creek, and he was there, skipping stones. He had the bluest eyes I've ever seen, and a smile that made me forget my own name. We talked for an hour. He's from Boston. Can you imagine? Boston. He says the world is changing, and he wants to be part of it. He talked about civil rights and music and things I've only read about in newspapers. I felt so provincial. But he didn't make me feel that way. He made me feel like my thoughts mattered. Sarah sat down heavily on a kitchen chair. James Carter. She had never heard that name. Her grandfather's name was Robert. Robert Williams. A kind, quiet man who had worked at the local bank and died when Sarah was 10. She remembered him as steady and reliable, the sort of man who wore a cardigan and read the newspaper from front to back. He didn't sound like a James from Boston who talked about changing the world. She read on, devouring the entries. The journal chronicled a summer romance that was as intense as it was secret. Eleanor wrote of stolen kisses behind the hay bales, long conversations under the star-dusted Kansas sky, and plans for a future that stretched far beyond the borders of their small town. James was passionate, ambitious, and deeply in love with her grandmother. He wanted to take her back to Boston with him. He wanted to marry her. August 20, 1965. Father found out. He was furious. He said James is not one of us, that he has big city ideas and no roots. He forbade me from seeing him. He said my duty is here, to the family, to the farm. He has already spoken to Robert Williams, who has been sweet on me for years. Father says Robert is stable, from a good family, and will take over the farm one day. He says a life with James is a fantasy. My heart feels like it's been shattered into 1,000 pieces. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. She had always known her grandparents' marriage as one of quiet, comfortable companionship. She had never sensed any great passion, but also no great unhappiness. It was just a fact of life. But this journal revealed a different truth. It revealed a woman who had loved fiercely and had that love systematically dismantled by duty and filial obligation. She put the journal down and picked up the bundle of letters. They were from James. The postmarks were from Boston, dated in the fall of 1965. The first one was frantic, desperate. My dearest Eleanor, I don't understand. Your last letter said it was over, that you had to do your duty. What duty is greater than love? What life is this that is chosen for you? I love you. I love you with every fiber of my being. Please, Ellie, don't do this. Meet me. I'll come back for you. We can leave tonight. There's a whole world waiting for us. The letters continued, their tone shifting from desperate pleading to confused hurt, and finally, to a sad, resigned acceptance. The last letter was dated December 1965. Eleanor, I received the announcement. You and Robert, I suppose this is goodbye. I want you to know that I will love you until the day I die. You were the most real and beautiful thing that ever happened to me. I hope he knows how lucky he is. I hope he makes you happy. Always, James. Sarah felt a profound sadness for this young man, for this love story that was snuffed out before it could truly begin. She then opened the small velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant locket. She pressed the catch, and it sprung open. On one side was a tiny, faded photograph of a young, handsome man with a confident smile and, just as her grandmother had written, strikingly blue eyes. James. On the other side was a lock of dark hair, tied with a minute thread. This was the great, hidden love of her grandmother's life. The secret she had carried for over 50 years. Sarah thought of the calm, predictable rhythm of her grandparents' life together, the Sunday roasts, the anniversaries celebrated with a nice dinner, the way her grandfather would bring her grandmother a cup of tea without her having to ask. It had all been built on the foundation of this monumental, silent sacrifice. A new thought, unsettling and urgent, began to form in Sarah's mind. What happened to James Carter? Did he find happiness? Did he ever think of Eleanor? The journal and letters stopped in 1965. He would be in his late 70s now, if he was still alive. Her marketing instincts kicked in. She had resources. She had the internet. She carried the chest to the small desk in the den, fired up her laptop, and began to search. The name, James Carter, was, unsurprisingly, common. But adding, Boston, and a rough estimate of his age, she calculated he'd be around 78, narrowed it down. She scrolled through pages of search results, obituaries, LinkedIn profiles, Facebook pages. It felt invasive, yet the pull was irresistible. She had to know. After an hour of fruitless searching, she tried a different tactic. She searched for James Carter, Boston author. Her grandmother had mentioned he loved to write, that he wanted to write novels. The search results loaded, and she scanned them. And then she saw it. James Carter, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, known for his poignant explorations of love, loss, and the roads not taken. Her breath caught in her throat. She clicked on the link. It was a Wikipedia page. There was a photo of an older man, his hair white, his face lined, but the eyes were the same brilliant blue, even in a black and white photograph. It was him, she read, her heart pounding. James Carter, born 1946, is an American novelist and short story writer. His debut novel, The Kansas Sky, published in 1972, won the National Book Award. He went on to win the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1985 for his novel, Echoes of a Summer. He is a professor emeritus of creative writing at Boston University. He never married. He never married. The words echoed in the silent room. He had become a famous author, writing about love and loss, and he had never married. Sarah felt a chill. It couldn't be a coincidence. His debut novel was called The Kansas Sky. Her grandmother's secret had not just been locked in a chest, it had been poured onto the page for the world to read, a ghost haunting his entire literary career. She found his website. It was simple, elegant. There was a contact form for his literary agent. What was she supposed to do? Write to him. Hello, you don't know me, but my grandmother was the great love of your life you wrote about 50 years ago. She just died. By the way, she kept your locket. It felt monstrous. And yet, the thought of doing nothing felt equally wrong. This wasn't just a story anymore, it was two real, lived lives, filled with quiet what-ifs. Her grandmother had made her choice, lived her life with quiet dignity. But James, he had built a life on the memory of that summer. For the next 2 days, Sarah was consumed. She read everything she could find by and about James Carter. She found interviews where he was vague about his personal life, always deflecting to his work. She read The Kansas Sky. It was a beautiful, aching story about a young man from the East who falls in love with a farmer's daughter in the Midwest and their doomed romance. The ending was different from real life. In the book, the couple eloped. It was the happy ending he had wanted for himself. She also continued cleaning, but now with a new purpose. She wasn't just clearing out a house, she was piecing together a life. She found the wedding album. The photos showed a young Eleanor, beautiful but with a solemnity in her eyes that Sarah had never noticed before. Her grandfather, Robert, looked proud, happy, and utterly unaware that he was his wife's second choice. The weight of the secret felt immense. She called her mother. "Mom," she began, trying to sound casual. "Did Grandma ever talk about anyone named James?" Before she met Grandpa, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "James? No, I don't think so. Why do you ask?" "Just found some old letters while cleaning." "No reason," Sarah said, her voice too bright. Her mother sighed. "You know, your grandmother was a very practical woman. She believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. She loved your grandfather, in her way. They built a good life together. In her way." The words hung in the air. Sarah knew now what that way was. It was a love born of respect and shared history, not of passionate, all-consuming fire. That night, sitting alone in the quiet house, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't let this story end with two graves. She had to reach out. Not for herself, and maybe not even for her grandmother, but for James. He deserved to know that his love had not been forgotten, that it had been cherished and locked away, a precious secret kept for a lifetime. She went to the contact form on his website. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What were the YouTube policies on this? The thought was absurd, a relic of her professional life. This wasn't content, this was a human connection. But the principles applied. Be respectful, be honest, do no harm. She began to type, choosing her words with extreme care. "Dear Mr. Carter, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I am the granddaughter of Eleanor Williams, who passed away recently at her home in Oak Grove, Kansas. While clearing out her home, I discovered a chest containing a journal and some letters from the summer of 1965. They mention a young man named James from Boston. I believe that man was you. I also have a locket with a photograph that I believe is of you. I am writing to you not to intrude upon your privacy, but because I felt that the profound affection and respect my grandmother held for you, which she kept private her entire life, was something you had a right to know about. She never forgot you. I understand if you do not wish to respond. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Sarah Mitchell." She included her email and phone number before she could lose her nerve and hit send. The next 48 hours were an agony of anticipation. Every ping from her phone sent a jolt through her. She jumped when an email came in from her boss, asking for an update on a project. She gave a vague reply, her mind 1,000 miles away, in Boston. She was in the backyard, clearing out a flower bed her grandmother had always loved, when her phone rang. It was an unknown number with a Boston area code. Her hands, covered in dirt, trembled as she answered. "Hello, is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was old, raspy, but cultured and clear. "Yes, this is she. This is James Carter." He paused, and she could hear him take a slow, shaky breath. "I received your email. I hope it wasn't an unwelcome surprise," Sarah said, her heart hammering. "Surprise is too small a word," he said, and she could hear the emotion thick in his voice. It's the answer to a question I stopped asking myself 50 years ago. Thank you for writing." They talked for an hour, right there in the garden with the Kansas sun warming her back. He was hesitant at first, then the words began to flow. He asked about Eleanor's life, her family, how she had died. Sarah told him about her grandfather, about the life they had built, careful to be respectful. She was happy, Sarah said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. It was a different kind of happiness. Was she? James asked, his voice soft. "I'm glad, truly. I spent many years being angry, then many more being sad. Eventually, I just accepted that some stories aren't meant to have a conventional ending. I poured all of it into my writing. The Kansas Sky, that was for her. That was the ending I wanted for us. It's a beautiful book, Sarah said. You've read it? He sounded surprised and pleased. I've read all of them, these last few days. He chuckled, a warm, rich sound. Then you know my heart better than almost anyone alive. He asked about the locket. She described it, and he remembered the day he'd given it to her, the day he'd cut the lock of her hair. She was so beautiful, he whispered, his voice fading with the memory. Before they hung up, he surprised her. Sarah, would it be too much of an imposition if I came to see you? To see the chest? I know it's a lot to ask. Without hesitation, Sarah said, I think it would be perfect. 2 days later, a rental car pulled into the gravel driveway. Sarah watched from the window as an elderly man got out. He was tall and lean, dressed in a tweed jacket despite the warmth, and he moved with a writer's careful deliberation. He looked up at the house, his face a mask of complex emotion. She met him at the door. Mr. Carter. James, please, he said, his blue eyes, still so bright, scanning her face. You have her smile, he said softly. She led him inside to the kitchen table, where she had laid out the chest, the journal, the letters, and the locket. It was a profoundly intimate moment, watching this distinguished, celebrated man handle these fragile artifacts of his own youth. His hands trembled as he picked up the locket, pressing it open. He stared at the tiny photograph of himself for a long time, then at the lock of hair. I loved her, he said, not to Sarah, but to the ghost in the room. I never stopped. He spent the afternoon there, reading the journal entries, his own letters. Sometimes he would smile, sometimes a tear would trace a path down his wrinkled cheek. Sarah made tea and gave him space, feeling like a guardian of a sacred space. As the sun began to set, painting the Kansas sky in hues of orange and purple, he finally closed the journal. She was more eloquent than I ever was, he said. All these years, I wondered if I had built it up in my head, if it was just a summer infatuation. But it was real, it was all real. He looked at Sarah. You've given me a gift I can never repay. You've given me closure. You've given me the truth. What will you do now? She asked. He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. I will go back to Boston. And I will write. I think I finally have the ending for a story I've been trying to finish for a decade. It's about an old man who receives a letter that changes everything. He stayed for 2 more days. Sarah showed him around the town, the creek where he and Eleanor had first met, the old Henderson farm. It was a pilgrimage for him, a laying of ghosts to rest. They talked for hours about life, about writing, about her grandmother. He was witty, intelligent, and kind. Sarah felt like she had gained a strange, wonderful new relative. When it was time for him to leave, he stood by his car. She would be so proud of you, Sarah. You have her curiosity and her heart. He reached into his bag and pulled out a book. It was a first edition of The Kansas Sky. He opened it and inscribed it. For Sarah, who unlocked more than a chest. Thank you for bringing me back to the Kansas sky. With deepest gratitude, James Carter. He drove away, a dust plume rising behind his car. Sarah stood in the driveway, holding the book to her chest. The house was empty now, the estate sale over. But it no longer felt heavy with sadness. It felt peaceful. She had gone into this task expecting to sort through the physical remnants of a life. Instead, she had pieced together a hidden history of love and sacrifice, a story of 2 paths diverging. She had learned that her grandmother was not just the kindly old woman who baked apple pies, but a vibrant young girl who had known a great, heartbreaking love. She had learned that the quiet, predictable life she sometimes feared for herself was not the only kind of life, and that the roads not taken could have their own powerful, resonant echoes. She got into her own car to drive back to the city, back to her marketing job and her curated life. But she felt different, lighter. She had been a catalyst in a love story that had spanned 6 decades, a story that wasn't about a dramatic reunion, but about peace, understanding, and the enduring power of a first love. She had changed the ending for James Carter, and in doing so, she had changed the beginning of her own understanding of love, family, and the secret histories that shape us all. The Kansas sky stretched out above her, vast and full of promise, holding its stories close until the right person came along to listen.